Welcome back, everybody. Today we're diving into something I know a lot of you have been dreaming about. A trip to Egypt. We've got two fantastic travel guides here, absolutely overflowing with tips and hidden gems. I am so excited to share some of the amazing things I learned while prepping for this deep dive. If you enjoyed the video podcast, give that like button a hit and subscribe to help us grow the channel. Also, stay around to the end and you'll get a bonus tip on how to get great discounts on your future holiday.
Okay. What stood out to you initially about these guides?
Honestly, I was impressed by how thoroughly they cover everything, from the must-see historical sites to the nitty-gritty of visas and currency exchange. It's clear they're aiming to make this trip accessible to anyone, whether you're a seasoned traveler or a first-timer. Totally. And they don't just skim the surface. I was
Okay.
surprised by how deep they go into things like the controversy surrounding certain artifacts, or the debate for the best way to experience the Nile. But before we get too deep into the weeds, let's start with the basics. Why Egypt? We all know about the pyramids and the Sphinx, but what makes this destination so special in your opinion?
Well, think about it. Egypt is essentially a living museum, spanning over 5,000 years of history. You're not just looking at ruins, you're walking in the footsteps of pharaohs, exploring tombs that haven't been touched for centuries, and witnessing a culture that's evolved over millennia. That kind of tangible connection to the past is something you just don't find everywhere.
It really is mind-blowing when you put it that way. And these guides highlight that Egypt isn't just about ancient history. They talk about vibrant cities, stunning desert landscapes, and even the chance to relax on the Red Sea coast. It's like getting multiple vacations in one.
Exactly. And that's what makes Egypt such a captivating destination. There's something for everyone.
Okay, so let's say you're ready to start planning this epic adventure. What are some of the essential things to consider? These guides had some really useful advice.
Absolutely. First off, timing is key. Both guides recommend visiting during the cooler months, from October to April. This way you can comfortably explore all those outdoor sites without worrying about the scorching summer heat.
Makes sense. I can't imagine trekking through the desert in 100-degree weather. Speaking of practicalities, one of the guides actually breaks down the different types of visas you might need and how to apply for them. They even mention a recent change in visa regulations that could be important for some travelers. It's those little details that really set these guides apart.
I agree. And on the topic of budgeting, they emphasize that Egypt can be incredibly affordable, especially compared to some other popular tourist destinations. One guide even provides a sample budget for a week-long trip, breaking it down by accommodation, meals,
Yep.
transportation, and activities.
Wow, that's super helpful. It's easy to get sticker shock when planning a big trip, so having that kind of realistic breakdown can be a lifesaver.
Definitely. And speaking of must-see destinations, Cairo is obviously a top contender.
Oh, absolutely. But I have to admit, even I learned some new things about Cairo from these guides. Beyond the pyramids and the Sphinx,
Yeah.
they delve into some lesser-known gems.
Yes, one of the guides talks about the Mosque of Ibn Tulun, which is apparently this incredible architectural masterpiece with a spiral minaret unlike anything else in the Islamic world.
Right. And I was fascinated by the mention of the Coptic Cairo district, where you can explore ancient churches and monasteries dating back to the early days of Christianity. It's like peeling back layers of history within the city itself.
And of course, no trip to Cairo would be complete without a visit to the Khan el-Khalili Bazaar. It's not just a marketplace, it's a sensory experience.
Totally. The guides describe it as a labyrinth of narrow alleyways, filled with everything from spices and perfumes to handcrafted souvenirs and antique treasures. And they don't shy away from the art of haggling, which is apparently an essential part of the experience.
One guide even provides some insightful tips on how to haggle respectfully and successfully. It's like a cultural crash course in bargaining.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to brush up on my haggling skills before I go. Okay, so Cairo is a must-see. But what other destinations did these guides highlight?
Well, moving south along the Nile, Luxor is another essential stop. They call it the world's greatest open-air museum, and for good reason.
I remember reading about Luxor in these guides and being completely blown away by the sheer concentration of ancient temples and tombs. It's like stepping back in time.
Exactly. You have the Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs like Tutankhamun were buried, the majestic Karnak Temple, with its towering columns and intricate carvings, and the Luxor Temple, which is beautifully illuminated at night.
And one detail that really stuck with me was the mention of the ongoing excavation efforts in the Valley of the Kings. Apparently, archaeologists are still making new discoveries there, which just adds to the sense of mystery and wonder.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for something a little more off the beaten path, one guide suggests visiting the Temple of Dendera. which is dedicated to the goddess Hathor.
Oh, yes. I remember reading that it's one of the best preserved temples in all of Egypt, with vibrant colors and incredibly detailed reliefs. It sounds like a hidden gem.
And then further south, you have Aswan, which offers a more relaxed atmosphere compared to the bustling cities of Cairo and Luxor.
The guides paint such a vivid picture of Aswan. They talk about felucca rides at sunset, exploring the botanical gardens on Kitchener's Island, and visiting the unfinished obelisk, which provides a fascinating glimpse into ancient Egyptian engineering.
And let's not forget the Nubian villages near Aswan, where you can experience a completely different side of Egyptian culture. The guides describe the Nubian people as incredibly welcoming and hospitable, with their own unique traditions and vibrant art forms.
It's amazing how diverse Egypt is as a destination.
It really is. And for those seeking a bit of relaxation after all that historical exploration, the Red Sea resorts offer a complete change of pace.
Yes. The guides mention Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada as prime spots for diving, snorkeling, and soaking up the sun on pristine beaches. They even highlight the world-class coral reefs and marine life that draw divers from all over the globe.
It's a great way to round out your Egyptian adventure, combining ancient wonders with modern leisure.
So you've explored the pyramids, wandered through ancient temples, experienced the vibrant culture of Cairo, and relaxed on the Red Sea coast. Now comes a question that many travelers face when planning a trip to Egypt. Should you choose a Nile cruise or a land tour?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And these guides, they offer some great insights to help you weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah, I was really impressed by how they didn't just present one as being better than the other. They acknowledged that each option caters to a different travel style. What were some of the key differences they highlighted?
Well, Nile cruises. They're often described as a more relaxing and convenient way to experience the major sites along the river. You unpack once and let the ship do the work, so to speak, while you enjoy the scenery and guided tours.
Sounds pretty idyllic, right? Floating down the Nile like a modern-day Cleopatra. But I imagine cruises, they could feel a bit restrictive in terms of, where you can go and how long you can spend at each site.
That's a valid point. And the guides, they do acknowledge that land tours offer much more flexibility in that regard. You can customize your itinerary, delve deeper into specific areas that pique your interest, and even venture off the beaten track a bit.
So it really comes down to personal preference. Do you want a more structured and pampered experience? Or do you crave the freedom to explore at your own pace?
Exactly. And the guides, they do a great job of laying out the different considerations, like budget, time constraints, and even the level of physical activity you're comfortable with, for example. They mention that some land tours involve quite a bit of walking and exploring in hot conditions, whereas cruises are obviously more leisurely.
That's a good point. It's not just about the mode of transport, it's about the overall pace and style of the trip. Speaking of navigating a new environment, these guides had some really interesting insights into Egyptian culture and etiquette.
Yes. Cultural sensitivity is so important when traveling to any new destination. And Egypt is no exception. The guides provide some excellent advice on how to respectfully interact with locals and avoid any unintentional faux pas.
One thing that stood out to me was the emphasis on dressing modestly, especially when visiting religious sites. They suggest covering shoulders and knees as a sign of respect.
Right. And they also mention that public displays of affection are generally frowned upon in Egyptian culture. It's all about being mindful of local customs.
Yeah, I found it fascinating how they delve into the art of bargaining in the markets. Apparently, it's not just expected, it's practically a national sport.
They make it sound like a really engaging cultural exchange. It's not just about getting the lowest price. It's about building rapport with the vendor and engaging in a bit of playful banter.
One guide even suggests learning a few basic Arabic phrases to use while bargaining. Things like, "That's too expensive," or "Give me a good price." It's a great way to break the ice and show that you're making an effort.
And they emphasize the importance of staying good-natured throughout the process. Even if you don't agree on a price, it's important to end the interaction on a friendly note.
It's all about respect and good humor, right? And speaking of cultural nuances, one thing I was curious about was the concept of bakshish. The guides mention it a few times, but they don't really go into detail. Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. Bakshish is essentially a small tip or gratuity that's customary in Egypt for a variety of services. It could be anything from a small token of appreciation for a helpful bellhop to a tip for a tour guide or a street performer.
So it's not mandatory, but it's considered polite, and it's a way to acknowledge good service.
Exactly. And the guides. They provide some helpful guidelines on how much bakshish is appropriate in different situations. They also emphasize that it's always best to offer bakshish discreetly and respectfully.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm definitely making a note to have some small bills handy for bakshish when I'm there. Now, let's move on to a topic that I know everyone's eager to hear about. The food.
Egyptian cuisine. It's known for its rich flavors and hearty dishes. And these guides, they don't disappoint when it comes to culinary recommendations.
I was practically drooling over the descriptions of all the different dishes. One that really caught my eye was koshari.
Ah, koshari. It's considered Egypt's national dish, and it's a delicious and affordable vegetarian meal that you'll find everywhere, from street vendors to high-end restaurants.
The guides describe it as this amazing combination of rice, lentils, macaroni, and chickpeas, topped with a spicy tomato sauce and crispy fried onions.
And the best part is, you can customize it to your liking with various toppings and sauces.
Sounds like a culinary adventure in itself. What other must-try dishes did they recommend?
Well, ovlandams is another classic Egyptian dish. It's a slow-cooked fava bean stew that's often eaten for breakfast.
I remember reading about pulled madams and how it's considered a staple of Egyptian cuisine. It sounds simple, but incredibly flavorful and filling.
Right. And the guides mention that it's often served with pita bread, fresh vegetables, and a drizzle of olive oil.
Okay, now I'm officially starving. What about drinks? Any unique beverages we should try?
Absolutely. One drink that's mentioned repeatedly is hibiscus tea, also known as carcade.
I've actually had hibiscus tea before, and it's delicious. It has this tart, refreshing flavor, and a beautiful ruby red color.
The guides mention that it's served both hot and cold in Egypt, and it's considered a very healthy and refreshing drink.
Perfect for those hot Egyptian days. And I imagine Egyptian coffee is a must-try as well.
Oh yes, Egyptian coffee is very strong and flavorful. It's typically brewed in a special pot called the sezve and served in small cups.
The guides mention that it's often sweetened with sugar and flavored with cardamom.
And they warn that it's quite potent, so it's best to sip it slowly and savor the flavor.
Noted. I'll be sure to pace myself with the Egyptian coffee.
Yeah, okay.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from iconic landmarks and hidden gems to cultural etiquette and culinary delights. These guides, they really paint a comprehensive picture of what to expect on a trip to Egypt.
And they do a fantastic job of highlighting the diversity of experiences available.
It's clear that Egypt offers something for everyone, whether you're a history buff, an adventure seeker, a foodie, or simply someone who wants to immerse themselves in a rich and fascinating culture.
Exactly. And I think these guides provide the perfect foundation for anyone planning their dream trip to Egypt.
They really do.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I'm curious to know what stood out to you the most from all this research. Was there a particular fact, tip, or anecdote that really captured your imagination?
Oh, it's hard to choose. There were so many fascinating details, I think, for me. It was the way the guides emphasized the importance of sustainable tourism, being mindful of the environmental and cultural impact of our travels. They offered some really practical tips, like choosing eco-friendly accommodations, supporting local businesses, and respecting ancient sites.
Yeah, I agree. That's something I'm always trying to be more conscious of when I travel. It's great that these guides are promoting responsible tourism. So, what aspect of Egyptian culture or history are you most eager to experience firsthand?
That's a tough one, I think I'd have to say. Sailing down the Nile on a felucca, just imagining the peacefulness of it, the gentle breeze, the stunning scenery, and the chance to disconnect from the modern world.
That sounds incredible. Like something out of a movie.
Well,
I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about and hopefully inspired them to start planning their own Egyptian adventures. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if there's a destination you would like to hear about, leave it in the comments below. Now that bonus tip. Click the link in the bio and get great discounts on your future holiday. Until next time, happy travels.